Right now, there are people who bought a few acres of completely empty dirt for less than the price of a used car, and that same dirt is now paying them more than most people's salary. No building, no renovation, no employees, just land. And here's the part that should actually bother you. Over half of campers last year couldn't even get a booking because almost every public campground in America is full. That gap between too many people who want to get outside and not enough places for them to go is exactly where this business lives. Stick around, because the last number I'm going to show you is the one that makes people quit their jobs over this. Here's a stat that surprises almost everyone. The number of active campers in the US has grown nearly 70% over the last decade. But the number of actual campgrounds? Basically flat. So you've got millions of new people wanting a weekend outdoors, funneling into the same national and state parks that existed 20 years ago. More than half of campers surveyed said they struggled to find an open site because the popular ones were already booked out. Now, normally, when demand outpaces supply like this, prices just go up, and that's the end of the story. But land doesn't work like an apartment building. You don't need permits for a 100-unit complex. You need permission for a tent, which means the barrier to entering this market isn't money. It's knowing the model exists at all. Here's the actual mechanic. You buy a piece of raw, undeveloped land. No house, no plumbing, sometimes not even a road. Usually somewhere within a couple hours of a national park, a lake, or a well-known trail system. Then you check the local zoning rules to see how many campsites per acre you're legally allowed to run. In a lot of rural counties, that number is around 10 sites per acre, sometimes more. You list those spots on platforms built specifically for this. HipCamp is the biggest one, and it now has over 500,000 bookable sites and a community of more than 7 million campers actively searching for places just like yours. You're not building a campground in the traditional sense. You're renting out permission to park a tent on ground you already own. That's the entire business. No mortgage on a building, no staff to hire, no lobby to clean. Let's stop talking in theory and actually do the math, because this is where people either get excited or realize it's not for them. Say you buy 3 acres of raw rural land for around $12,000. That range is realistic in a lot of counties outside the obvious hotspots. Zoning allows 10 campsites per acre, so on paper you could run up to 30 spots, but nobody starts at full capacity, so let's be conservative. You list 5 basic tent sites at $50 a night. Here's the pattern interrupt most people miss. You don't need those sites full every night to make real money, even at a modest 30% occupancy. Call it 9 nights a month per site. That's about $1,400 a month, or close to $17,000 a year, off 5 parking spots for tents. Hosts who actually scale this, according to the platforms themselves, are commonly clearing $20,000 to $50,000 in a single summer, and the top operators are pulling past $150,000 a year, on land that costs $12,000 to buy. Do that math on a rental property, and you'll understand why this niche has quietly become one of the highest cash-on-cash return plays in real estate right now. And that's the conservative version. Push occupancy up during peak season. Add even 2 or 3 more sites as you learn what guests actually want. And that same $12,000 plot starts looking less like a hobby and more like a second income stream that happens to run itself on weekends. Now here's a detail that almost nobody outside this niche knows about, and it's the part I want you to comment on if you didn't know it either. In most agricultural counties, if you keep livestock on your land, and I mean a small number, sometimes just a handful of goats or a few leased cattle, your property can qualify for an agricultural tax exemption. That can cut your property tax bill dramatically, sometimes by more than half. Landowners in this space have figured out you can literally lease cattle from a neighboring rancher just to keep them grazing on your acreage, purely to unlock that tax status. Goats work even better for smaller lots because they're cheap, they reproduce fast, and campers genuinely enjoy having them around, which, by the way, becomes free marketing content for your listing photos. So you end up with a lower tax bill and a more bookable listing from the same 4 goats. Now the obvious objection, you're not physically there. Doesn't that mean total chaos? Turns out, no. Most owners in this space pay a local person, sometimes a virtual assistant, sometimes literally the rancher next door, to physically check the property once or twice a week. Booking platforms like HipCamp also come with built-in liability insurance automatically attached to every listing, which covers a huge chunk of the risk that used to make people nervous about strangers camping on their land. And practically, most guests on these platforms are exactly the demographic you'd want. People specifically paying extra to avoid the chaos of a packed public campground, which means they're not the ones causing chaos on yours. The sanitation question comes up a lot too. Depending on your zoning, that's usually solved with a simple pit toilet or a rented portable unit, and it's factored into how many sites you're legally allowed per acre in the first place. Once the basic tent sites are cash flowing, the upgrade path is almost always the same 3 moves. First, add a couple of glamping-style setups, a furnished canvas tent or a small cabin, because those commonly rent for 2 to 3 times what a bare tent site gets. Second, add RV hookups if your zoning allows it, since RV travelers tend to book longer stays and spend more on site. Third, and this is the one most people skip, build one small permanent structure, even something as simple as a barn-style building, because it turns your listing from empty field into destination, and destinations command higher nightly rates and better reviews. Owners who stack all 3 of these on a handful of acres are the ones you'll see quietly pulling 6 figures a year off land that started as an empty field nobody wanted. Now, if you think this is a guaranteed money printer with 0 downside, you're wrong, and I'd actually push back on anyone telling you otherwise. 2025 was a genuinely uneven year for this exact business. Industry reports showed travel spending getting more cautious, cross-border camping trips dropping sharply, and the number of campers worried about cost roughly doubling. And the classic hotspots, the Joshua trees of the world, got discovered. Land prices in those specific areas have climbed well past what made this profitable 5 years ago. So buying in an already famous zone is often the worst version of this strategy, not the best. The people still winning here aren't chasing the famous zip codes. They're finding the quiet county 2 hours from a busy park that nobody's paying attention to yet. This isn't passive in the do-nothing sense. Someone still has to manage bookings, pricing, and photos like a real listing. It's passive in the sense that you're not swinging a hammer or answering a front desk phone every day. Before you go searching listings tonight, let's be fair about who this doesn't work for. If you need income on day 1, this isn't it. Most owners say it takes a full season, sometimes 2, before bookings, reviews, and pricing settle into a predictable rhythm. If you can't stomach even a small amount of hands-on management, approving guests, adjusting pricing for weekends versus weekdays, keeping photos updated, you'll underperform the numbers I just walked you through, because this niche rewards active hosts, not passive ones who set it and forget it. And if your only plan is to copy exactly what's already working in a famous location, you're buying at the top instead of finding the next quiet county before everyone else does. This works best for people willing to be a little boring about it. Pick an overlooked area, run the numbers conservatively, and let a full season of data tell you whether to expand. So here's where I actually land on this. A few acres of unglamorous dirt in the right county, listed the right way, is quietly outperforming a lot of traditional real estate on a dollar-for-dollar basis. Not because it's a secret, the data's public, but because almost nobody thinks to look at raw land as a cash-flowing asset instead of something you wait to appreciate. I'll be honest, if you'd told me a $5,000 goat herd could lower your tax bill and boost your booking photos at the same time, I wouldn't have believed it either. So tell me, would you rather own 1 expensive rental property in a city or 10 cheap acres of raw land somewhere quiet? Comment which one, and tell me the county or region you'd actually try this in. Because the next video is about the exact mistake that turns a profitable plot like this into a money pit, and you don't want to make it before you've seen it.